Welcome to the new education show. This is a weekly show we put on to help people educate themselves. I'm here, this is Dean Val here with Dean Kevin and Jeremy, who's probably soon to be a dean himself. Who knows? But we're going to be presenting this and that. We may get Wendy in here. She's got 3 kids that she's homeschooling, and she reports to us what's going on with that. It's part of our education to see what has been going on really in the world of history and how we've been programmed into thinking certain ways, that reality is a certain way. So, but yeah, I just want to share that. One of the orphan train ideas that they depopulated the world, and then they had all these orphans, got rid of the adults, and they had these orphans they shipped around different parts of the world for labor and other purposes, and to reset history, because you could teach the kids anything about how things are. So one of the resets was what, 1820 or so, and he talks about another one. But this is when history was rewritten, basically. Because who goes back that far? You know, how can you really prove what happened? They can do anything they want with the history books and plant archaeological evidence and the earth, but things like the railroads and the architectures of the world that are what he talks about are so fantastic for the horse and buggy days. It doesn't make sense for some things that they tell us. So again, I wanted to share that. That's my share for today. Any comments or questions on that?
I wanted to comment. I had watched a video relating to that idea that these buildings weren't built necessarily, they were already there. But it had something to do along the lines of Tartaria, that these great castles and things like that, they just sort of buried them to an extent and had the tops, which is what you see like government buildings, etc.
Yeah, that's what he's talking about the Great Reset. There was a flood or something that buried a lot of these buildings, and then they just recaptured the, it was kind of a hidden thing when whatever flood, some people even say they were like, the flood was not, it was like people, that disintegrated from lasers or whatever, just a massive kill off of people. And then that's the litter part, that's the remains of them, this flood. And then the buildings, which were a lot taller, just got flooded up to, first, second story. And then that's why we see, even in San Diego, when I used to go to the San Francisco Bay Area every week on the plane, there was a big train building there. It's really cool looking in San Diego. The train depot was obviously Tartarian. And then across the street, there's a huge building that has like windows below the surface of the street level. Why would they build windows below the street level? So San Diego had a neat downtown area that was obviously Tartarian built, I thought. And then San Francisco, where I hung out a lot, that's a lot of history there with underground tunnels, and in the was in early 1900s, they had a World's Fair there. Massive, these huge, beautiful structures that they tore down. Why would they tear down these things after they built them? Just a lot of stuff, that's interesting, where they try to hide what was built up and pretend it was currently built or never existed. Anything else with that? Otherwise, we'll move on. Kevin has something, probably. Hi, Kevin.
Yeah, several years ago, there's a conference that goes on in the UK, obviously before this COVID nonsense made that so it wasn't possible to attend such things, but they called it the UFO Symposium. And it was basically a gathering of individuals from their respective alternative fields, everything from UFOs to crop circles to giants and everything in between. And there was an individual there who apparently had spent a lot of time in the Middle East, and he had no initial interest in anything other than what the controllers have fed him and indoctrinated him with. But when he went there, he was part of a film crew, and the idea was they were supposed to be filming the demolition of some of the old streets and towns in some area in the Middle East. I'm not sure exactly where, maybe Afghanistan, but and he said the same thing as you were saying, Val. As they were demolishing these streets, they would find another entire street of houses beneath the ground, and then they had to demolish that as well. And then when they demolished that, they found another layer beneath that. And he said they found literally multiple layers of, it's almost like worlds beneath worlds. And so it was basically indication of a whole series of disasters that had completely covered a world that had previously been. And but it got to the point where what they were unearthing was so troubling to the control system's narrative of what is, that they prevented the film crew from filming what they were actually bringing out, because they were saying they were bringing out all sorts of anomalous artifacts and technology and strange things that shouldn't have been there according to the official histories. And in regards to the ancient peoples and their abilities to build as they did, there was an individual in Africa called Michael Tellinger, and he's done a lot of research into the remains of giants that is found scattered across the African plains that are now fossilized. Again, like we were saying on the other show, indication of what was once a silica age. And also he would find endless conical shaped objects. And these seemed to be so prevalent in their millions scattered throughout the plains of Africa, and no one knew what they were. They were simply considered trinkets and artifacts from previous civilizations and eras, and simply stored in the museums of Africa without realizing their purpose. But then what they realized were that the exact design of and the geometry of these cones was such that holding them in a particular way, if directed at an object, no matter how vast, would allow that object to be elevated. And there was an individual who actually figured out, because you have to hold them in a precise way, a precise direction in relation to each other. And there was actually an individual who built an entire, I think it was a castle or something made from stone, just one individual. He wasn't a young man either, in his 80s, I think, and he built a stone castle that overnight using these two conical objects, but he wouldn't reveal how they were utilized, how they were used, because he felt they might perhaps be abused. But does show that this technology can take very simple forms, but be very effective. And again, Michael Tellinger also revealed how there was great evidence of the population of Africa being far greater than we are led to believe, because he actually would find evidence of habitation or the remains of it that were so widespread that it suggested there were billions of people in Africa at a point where there shouldn't have been, again, according to the official histories. And interestingly as well, what remained of their abodes, which was basically the external walls, as it were, protruding from the ground. They were in such a geometrical design, they were able to utilize energies from the very earth, presumably then for all the uses that would be, cooking, heating. And so again, it points to how these ancient peoples not only were masterful at their buildings and were using various technologies to do so, but they were also utilizing this free energy from the ground based on their knowledge of geometry and how certain geometrical shapes can gather these energies and utilize them. Because I think Michael Tellinger and his team were putting devices in the ground, and they were getting such readings as it would almost indicate there must be volcanic activity beneath the ground where they knew that there wasn't. And it's very interesting as well when you said that that the mud slides may have been due to the disintegration or the killing of the population prior to it, because interested again quite in recent times when they had the situations with the I think some of the fires in Australia and California and such, where the fires were so intense as to literally can turn animals into ash. And so, you know, and the fire people said there's no fire in the world that will be hot enough to do that in such a short period of time. And so again, it suggests that the technology they were using there with the lasers and such may have been along similar lines to what befell the previous populations of the Earth. Some technology that literally reduced people into mud or ash or a mass of carbon, whatever. And
Okay. Any comments on what Kevin said? Anybody? Tim or Ryan or Jeremy?
Yeah, I wanted to say about the geometrical shapes. I've been, not to get into too much of the real side experiences, just wanted to say that I don't know if any of you or anybody's been having, but I've been seeing a lot about geometrical shapes, specifically parabolas, like the conical shape. So I thought that was interesting that Kevin mentioned that. And then when I did the research on it, kind of figuring out where it came from and what its purpose was, and that no matter where light hits it, it always focuses on one point. The sound wave hit my ears really hard. I started ringing. So just wanted to say that.
Yeah, all that technology stuff maybe came from Atlantis and when we were there. It's just so many different experiences. It seems countless to all these things that are taking place right now as we're talking. They're building the biggest weapon that's ever been built in many ways, whether it's the technology called laser, just a magnification of what they've done already, being able to control these physical forces and have an intense power to do things with the forces. It's almost like black magic that so many on Earth and so many countries are involved with creating.
Do you have anything in Portland that you've noticed strange, like buildings or waterways or anything that you've noticed that could be Tartarian related, or some of the big cities there in Oregon?
No, Portland has a wonderful giant bridge in the sky. That's pretty amazing, but that's modern. It's really way up in the sky from above the rivers, and I don't think that there's anything from the past in that area that's just sticking out and known.
Yeah, okay. And still, if you could, have you been looking at the primary water? If there's anybody that does the drilling for the primary water, have you found anybody? Just curious.
No, that's something that it would be pretty exciting to create some machinery to do that. I guess in some ways you can't miss, but it's so far in some places, be able to access it unless you have some fault or something through the crust of the earth where you can not have to go so deep to get to where it is in masses.
I understand that's the idea, go through a fissure or fault. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you look at things like the San Andreas Fault or the Juan de Fuca Fault off the Oregon coast out here, and you just wonder how far, because it may be to have real plentiful supply, it may have to go maybe even some miles to get the amount that a person's after for the area, because it would sure be a lot different if you provide water all over some of the deserts when they get so much sun, and then when they have water, certain plants just thrive so much, like the equator seems to get all the water naturally it needed to just thrive and grow so plentifully.
Let's keep looking. I'm looking too. And Kevin, do you have anything else for the education part?
Yeah, I did find some information which was would continue on from that which I spoke about regarding the moon. So I thought it would be a continuation of that. The book in question, it is a this one here,
Get off your knees. Okay.
Human Race, Get Off Your Knees by David Icke. It's not his most recent book, but nevertheless, what is in it is still relevant to what's happening today, because he cites a lot of the control systems and their technologies that they bring to bear and bombard the human race with. And a lot of his information seems to be very accurate and verified by Duane, and also verified on the real side. And so I want to
Who
read
is
a bit
this again?
about
Who's the author?
David Icke.
Who?
David Icke.
Oh, David Icke. Okay. Okay. Good.
I'll read this bit called A Moon Control. The effect of the moon on human perception and life on Earth is obvious, even without the artificial transmissions that I will call the moon matrix. The moon is closely associated with mind and emotions, the very targets of the reptilian agenda. The UK Independent newspaper reported in 2007 on research confirming the influence of the moon on human behaviour in an article headed "How the Moon Rules Your Life." Folklore has long connected the moon to people becoming lunatics, losing their mind. Researchers discovered, however, that the effects go much deeper into the fine detail of human life. They reviewed 50 studies and added their own research before suggesting that doctors and police should prepare for their work to increase at certain phases of the lunar cycle. The study revealed that doctors' appointments rose by 3.6% during a full moon, and that gout and asthma attacks peaked during new and full moons. The bladder is also affected, as is hormonal balance. The Journal of the Florida Medical Association reported findings by Dr. Edson J. Andrews that 82% of post-operative bleeding crises happened nearer the full and the new moon, even though fewer operations were performed at those times. The moon influences fertility fundamentally. Data from 140,000 births in New York showed systematic variations in births over the lunar cycle of 29.53 days, with the peak in the last quarter. The report said that the timing of the fertility peak suggests that the period of decreasing illumination immediately after the full moon may precipitate ovulation. Dr. Michael Zimecki of the Polish Academy of Sciences said the lunar cycle has an impact on human reproduction, in particular fertility, menstruation, and the birth rate. These effects are not all caused by the moon's gravitational pull on the Earth, as was once believed, but also by the effect it has on human hormones. Fertility, spontaneous abortions, and thyroid disease were also affected, and Dr. Zimecki said more research was needed to establish why this was so. He suggested that it could be the effect of the moon's gravity on immune systems, hormones, and steroids. Dr. Zimecki said the prime candidates to exert regulatory function on the immune response are melatonin and steroids, whose levels are affected by the moon cycle. He went on, it is suggested that melatonin and endogenous steroids may mediate the described cyclic alterations of physiological processes, electromagnetic radiation, and or the gravitational pull of the moon may trigger the release of hormones. Look at the implications for control and influence if you have the power to control these things. Studies of crime figures found them to be much higher on full moon days than any other, and that road accidents were significantly more frequent during the waxing than the waning of the moon. A study at Georgia State University found that eating and drinking habits are influenced by moon phases. It said that a small but significant lunar rhythm of nutrient intake was observed, with an 8% increase in meal size and a 26% decrease in alcohol intake at the time of the full moon relative to the new moon. University of Miami psychologist Arnold Lieber and his colleagues studied data on murders in one county over 15 years. They matched the murder figures with moon phases and found they rose and fell together. The murder rate rose sharply as the full and new moons neared, and declined during the first and last quarters. They repeated the experiment in another county in Ohio and saw very similar results. An American Institute of Medical Climatology report for the Philadelphia Police Department discovered that the full moon marks a peak in a number of crimes, including murder, reckless driving, and arson. There are apparently more fights, riots, and general unrest among prison inmates at the full moon. Greek philosopher Aristotle and Roman historian Pliny the Elder believed that the moon influenced the brain, the moistest organ in the body, as it affected the tides. Modern scientists mostly reject this, but they don't understand the full effect of the moon on human perception, because it operates on many wavelengths that they are unable to measure. Vedic astrology is an ancient Indian astrological system that interprets the movements and positions of planets and the moon with regard to their effects on humanity and the earth. It goes back thousands of years to the Indus Valley culture and beyond. Vedic astrology says that the moon rules the mind, and both thoughts and feelings. It says that the moon is the father of Mercury, because Mercury, intellect, is born from the moon. Mercury rules the rational mind, according to this system, while the moon rules everything else, including the past, memories, conditioned behavior patterns, and emotional responses. These patterns and responses are the very foundation of human control, and there is a very good reason for that. Humans are controlled from the moon. There are many who say that we are not significantly influenced by the moon, and yet experiments with something as small as a cockroach have shown stress-related changes in the chemical composition of their blood connected to the new and full moon. It is suggested that this is caused by changes in the Earth's electromagnetic field instigated by the moon. That is precisely the point. The moon's influence is happening in the metaphysical universe, the information blueprint from which everything in the holographic realm of a physical experience is made manifest. Electromagnetic changes become holographic changes.
So what is the moon? How is the influence then sending it's a satellite? What is it sending here on Earth to make all these reactions and influences? Sending moonbeams of some sort, electromagnetic, or what is it? How is it influencing us that you found out?
Well, it seems to be sending very distorted frequencies, which then impact the consciousness. And obviously, if you impact the consciousness and change it in any way, you then change the affected simulation that stems from it. And of course, also with distorted frequencies can be carried various ideas and emotional frequencies embedded into it that can then be installed into the consciousness, which individuals who are locked into their personal self will not be able to differentiate between their own thoughts, emotions, and those implanted in them from others, which at their base state are all frequencies and ideas. And only if you stand in your real awareness in difference could you perhaps determine where the source of these ideas and notions are coming from. So it seems that the moon is part of their control system and the moulding of the consciousness to affect a simulation according to the controller's desired design. So it's all part of their control system. You know, basically they have to have everybody agree with what they want in order for what they want to become a shared collective simulated effect of reality, and the moon is part of that structure, it seems, that is designed for the moulding and manipulation of this consciousness.
Is this similar to Saturn and like being a broadcasting station kind of for subliminals, etc.? You know,
As I understand it, the main source of the subliminal bombardment does come from Saturn. It seems to then be collected by the moon, almost like a gathering station for it. Then it is amplified and beamed onto and focused onto the Earth. So a lot of people have actually recorded very strange frequencies coming from the rings of Saturn, and they've even been recorded, and there's sound tracks of them as well. And even people who have no interest in anything beyond the one-dimensional physical world have said and analysed these sound waves. Said, well, these are basically sound frequency waves, like a transmission. So it does seem that Saturn is the source of it, and then the moon seems to amplify it and beam it and focus it onto the Earth. And David Icke has made mention of that, and he called it the Saturn-Moon matrix for that very reason. So it's a lot of stuff is going on. So we are constantly bombarded with some subliminals and such from various sources, and that's just another source of it. And like Duane said, the moon is a big satellite, a hollowed out spacecraft that is basically monitoring everything that's going on the Earth, and it probably has various other functions as well. And one of them does seem to be, as a mechanism for altering human consciousness. Yeah.
And this is reptilian-based control.
Yeah, it's all, well, all of the control on the planet will be reptilian based, because reptilians control the planet and pretty much the entire simulator, although as we've said, there are a lot stepping up now. But regardless, yes, that it is part of their reptilian infrastructure. And it's very interesting as well, because as we spoke earlier about how certain frequencies will create certain geometrical forms, because the frequency can be expressed in form as well as it can in sound and color. On Saturn, one part of it, I think the top or the bottom, there's actually, I think, a hexagon, the shape that is constantly there, and this cannot be explained, because again, it's not a shape that should be there unless something is causing it to be. And they suggest that the frequencies coming off of Saturn are causing a gigantic hexagonal shape to be permanently present on one part of, I think, either the top or the bottom of Saturn. So
Any questions for Kevin or comments? It's interesting.
also, I want to add as well that on Saturn, as well as they have the hexagon on one side of it, there's also what looks very much like a huge eye on the other side of it, which is based on cloud formations as well. But the size, the scale of it would be enormous. And they believe that the controllers based their main symbol, which is that of the eye, based on this eye formation that is on the planet Saturn. And they originally worshipped, I think, they worshipped the planet Saturn, and that was their god, which later came through the ages and became from Saturn to become Satan. So it's the same word, just slightly remodeled and repackaged.
Thank you. Thank you. Interesting.
Oh, I do see how the moon affects mankind and plant life and everything, the cycles, whatever it is that comes off of it, whether it's vibrations or frequencies or energy or whatever you want to call it, does have a big effect how it moves the ocean and the cycles as it goes around the earth. And that's all part of the worldly teachings that the Rosicrucian order has about self-mastery and fate and the cycles of life, about the positive, or I don't know if you want to call it positive, but there's beneficial times to do things according to the moon's cycles, daily cycles, and weekly cycles and monthly cycles. And then there's unfortunate times to do certain things. If you're in harmony with the cycles, then you accomplish what you're trying to create. If you're not in harmony, then the discord doesn't allow you to be able to create what you're trying to create. It has, what I see about the moon is, in the physical, very powerful on us to work in harmony. It's the same old thing. You have to have the real guidance to know the harmony, what times it is to do certain things and what times not to do. It's the guidance and the education stuff and the physical.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks, Tim. Okay, guys, thanks. Let's do the NUUU, and we'll see you around the neighborhood. NUUU. Kevin? Jeremy?
NUUU.
Tim?
NUUU.